Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dogs Down South. Good to see you tonight. See you. I can't see you, but good to be with you tonight. It is eerily 8 days away from spring practice, and weird to say that. Feels like we just got done with the college football season. I think I've said that every single show for the past few weeks now. But welcome in. Got a loaded show for you tonight. Little kind of catch up show. I'm going to fly solo tonight. So we're going to get to some really cool things. We're going to talk a little bit about spring preview. We're going to finish off our way too early power rankings and combine it with an over under SEC wins and losses. We'll do some mailbag Q&A, fun facts, things of that nature. We're going to kind of move around pretty well. Finish up from our episode 50 show from 2 weeks ago where we started our power rankings. And so just bear with me tonight because I'm flying solo, so I don't have any backup parameters. So I got to be thinking on my feet, right? This is back of the old days, so missing my man Fish and Richman. But welcome in. I hope everybody's doing well. So big news, I think, to hit right off the bat that's a lot of people are talking about in spring right now is the spring game worth playing anymore? So this was kind of news to my ears because I was like, what? Like, why are these teams canceling their spring games? And so basically come to find out that a lot of teams are very concerned. They're very concerned that with a portal opening up right after spring, and obviously some teams introducing some form of depth, whether it be on the number one team or number two team or A B team or whatever, that some of these players are getting a consensus of maybe where they're going to sit for the year, and it gives them an observation of, I don't know, how they want to shop in the portal. And it also gives, the spring game festivities and ESPN covering a lot of big games. It's an open avenue for some of these teams to go see what they need and to go, man, I mean, like they're playing on the second string of this group and they look like promising players. So what if we reach out to these guys and see if we can, acquire them for some starter needs? I don't know. But it was fascinating to hear the reasons why. But we are in an NIL era where everything is just constantly changing. For the good, no. For the bad, yeah. I mean, I really don't think anything about what's going on with NIL is changing the sport in a great way, except for the fact that players are getting a little bit of players are getting a lot of compensation for, I guess, being a part of some of these funds and money that universities are taking on, and so on and so forth. But I don't know, man. When you start to deal with the spring games, I mean, I enjoy the spring games, me personally, because I do feel like that the spring games provide an avenue for you to see those up and coming freshmen, even portal players that you don't know kind of what cards they hold. You don't hear a lot about that goes on in spring practice. You see reports and reporters get 5, 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of practice, but it seemingly is the same as the season. It's very closed, very tight-lipped, and you see some pictures and wow. So, wow, you saw, Gunnar Stockton throwing, he was in a, red jersey or a black jersey or whatever. And, the G-Day game was always something where you got to see him compete and you got to see really what you possibly were going to get a preview of what you were going to see in the fall. So I personally like the G-Day game, but obviously this is a business thing. Georgia's keeping the G-Day game this year, from what I understand. That game, obviously, we just talked about how Georgia will be opening spring practice in 8 days, or March 12th. And right now, the G-Day game is officially slated for April 12th. So we'll go through 30 days. We'll spread out 15 to 18 practices amongst those 30 days or so, as they get a chance to get with players, meet with players, do installs, get a chance to see some freshmen, things of that nature, portal players. But looking forward to it. Have not. I mean, it's not been, I would say, as dreary of an off season. I'm watching watching the Dogs right now. They get this win against South Carolina live right here in basketball. I'm hearing we're clinched. We clinched an entry into the NCAA tournament, which is really cool for the Dogs because I think we've been hoping to get in the NIT for the last few years. And so has this been an incredible season? No, but this has definitely been a season so far for Georgia that looks on the up and up in basketball. And so it's made the off season a little bit more doable. But I know we started last week. We started our way too early SEC top 16. I'm going to be really quick on the last 8 teams that I have because we're going to get into an over and under win total with the SEC. We're going to answer some mailbag questions at the end as well. But I know last week, as a recap, I kind of had a predicted way too early power rankings for the SEC. That's not how I think the fall. I just think power rankings wise, this is what kind of rosters are coming back that can compete for these positions in the SEC. I had 16 Mississippi State, 15 Kentucky, 14 Vanderbilt, 13 Arkansas. These are all from episode 50. So if you want to go back and hear a little bit more of what me and Fish talked about, go check it out. Episode 50 on Apple Podcasts. 12 was Oklahoma, 11 Missouri, 10 Auburn, 9 A&M. And then we ended up here where I rounded out at 8 Ole Miss, 7 Florida, Tennessee at 6. I had South Carolina coming in at 5. I really like South Carolina this year. We're going to talk about and look at their schedules coming forward here pretty soon to tell you why I have them at 5. I got Alabama at 4. We'll talk about that here in a second too with schedules and what we think wins and losses look like. And then LSU at 3, Georgia 2, and Texas at 1. I kind of have Georgia and Texas kind of up there as I think their power rankings are pretty similar for next year. I think you could look at each positional group and give an edge here or there, but I'll just kind of have them at the top, and so be it. So, but let's kick into some. We get a chance in the off season to jump into the SEC a little bit more in depth. During the year, we cover a lot of day-to-day stuff on just Georgia football and the opponent for the week, and we like to do the pick'ems. We like to talk about injury news and what we think happened the previous game, what we need, what the expectations to win, what we got to do to win the game coming up that week. And we don't really get to venture off too much in those episodes during the week to really talk the rest of the SEC. And so these are all way too early things, but I did find it pretty interesting to see a lot of other podcasts that are doing some things similar in the SEC, but also to just hear, I try not to listen to this part because I try to do a good job of doing this myself, but trying to venture out and go, okay, like what do I really think is a number over and under that some of these teams will get to? And these are way too early predictions, but as I've torn through some of the rosters, I thought it would be cool to start there tonight and have a little fun with it. And we're going to do it in, worst to first type scenarios. And so bear with me because we're going to go through also with schedules. So I'll pull the first one up here. So over and under first for Mississippi State. So Mississippi State, so, you look at Mississippi State and, just when you think Van Buren and this team and Jeff Lebby had some building blocks. I know last year Van Buren really didn't come on the scene until Shapen got hurt. And so when you look at this whole scenario, you kind of go, all right, well, you got Blake Shapen coming back. Like, what can, Mississippi State do? They have a lot of wide receivers that either they were lost or, lost eligibility or were plucked through the portal. This is not a team that returns a lot of depth. I know Lebby is trying to build a roster here, but you got to look back at Blake Shapen, and it's a great starting point because Blake Shapen was completing 70% of his passes in a very pass-heavy offense last year for Mississippi State, and so but as we look at Mississippi State, I got, as I'm pulling the schedule. I'm looking at games at Southern Miss on the 30th, Arizona State, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois, Tennessee at home. You got to go to A&M, and you get an open game on the 11th. The 18th, you got to go to Florida. Texas at home. At Arkansas, you get Georgia at home. You got to go to Missouri. You're open before you play the Egg Bowl against Ole Miss. So I think over and under. I had Ole Miss at about 4.5. I think if I had to call the wins, I think Alcorn is a win. I think Northern Illinois is a win. And 4.5 was tough for me because, you know, 4.5 means that they go to Southern Miss. I think it's a win. There's 3, but your fourth. I think your fourth has to come somewhere in the midst of can you knock off? I mean, can you knock off a Ole Miss or an at Arkansas? This could very well be like a 3.5 or a 4.5. I mean, I'm graciously going with a 4.5 because there might be a win here somewhere. I mean, really tough home games. You got Arizona State. Obviously, what Arizona State did last year. I don't. You sometimes wonder, can Arizona State be the same team they were last year? I don't really know. Haven't really seen. They definitely lost a pretty good chunk of their roster from what they had last year. But is that a closer game than we think? But Mississippi State is definitely going to be a team this year that is continuing to try to build a roster and find themselves. And so I think 4.5 is gracious. I think there'll be some people that might go under 4.5. A lot of people will take the under on that because in order to get to 4.5, they got to go find a win against Arkansas or Missouri or Ole Miss or A&M at Texas A&M. Or, I mean, I think it's hard to even give these givens, but we're calling the givens Southern Miss, Alcorn, Northern Illinois. And we're calling those the given 3 wins. And so I think that people could maybe take the under on this. I don't know, but I got them at 4.5. Next team on my list is Kentucky. Man, just another. I mean, this is going to be definitely different than his last 2 years, but when you look at Kentucky in the rebuilding year, I'm hearing Zach Calzada, who is a well-traveled quarterback out of was at Auburn a few years back, is going to be. I don't know if he's fighting for the starting position or he is the guy. I don't really know, how that'll all pan out, but I do know that at the end of the day, this is once again another roster that is rebuilding, and Kentucky has struggled, and Stoops has struggled with a roster that wasn't rebuilding. So, at the end of the day, this is going to be a tough one for Kentucky. Let's pull Kentucky really quick. So you look at games, Toledo, Ole Miss, Eastern Michigan. They have an open date. They go to South Carolina. At Georgia, open date. Home against Texas, home against Tennessee, at Auburn, home against Florida, home against Tennessee Tech, at Vanderbilt, at Louisville. This is a tough schedule. I feel like that, this is going to be a tricky year. I mean, you wonder, if Stoops was going to get the can, why not last year? But, I think, you look at, I got him at 4.5. I think Eastern Michigan is still a tough win for them. I think with this roster, I think Tennessee Tech is a win. That's 2. I think at Louisville should be okay, especially late in the season as your 3rd. You want to say they can get Toledo. That's your 4. But then it just looks very daunting in the SEC, and it's because of the home and aways. It's Ole Miss, you get them at home, but you got to go to South Carolina, to Georgia, to Auburn. So all the games that you look at and go, are those winnable? You got to go visit those games, and I think the ones that you're going to be highly, you're going to be, those teams are going to be favored against you by multiple touchdowns will be at home against Tennessee, at home against Texas. I would even say at home against Florida. And you got to go to Vanderbilt, and that's not, that's not a gimme anymore. So I'm right at that 4.5 mark, but teams could probably, some people can look and go maybe under for Kentucky here. Next, I had Arkansas. I got Arkansas coming in at 5.5. When I look at Arkansas, it's very interesting because this Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino combo is probably on paper one of the best OC uh, quarterback combos in the SEC. Taylor Green could actually be one of the top quarterbacks to come off that list in the draft in a very weak, as of right now, a very weak quarterback draft coming into next year. Um, so, as we look at 5.5 for Arkansas, and some people are even looking at Arkansas and going, if they get 5.5, does that still suffice fully give um, another shot, for Sam Pittman next year? I look at Alabama, their schedule: Alabama A&M, Arkansas State, at Ole Miss, at Memphis, Notre Dame at home. You got an open date on the 4th at Tennessee, Texas A&M at home, Auburn at home, Mississippi State at home. It's a nice slate for them right there. Open and home against LSU, at Texas, and then home against Missouri. So, when you look at that scenario, you think you can pull 5.5 from here. I kind of pulled it from. I think Alabama and A&M's a win. I think Arkansas State's a win. I think Memphis will be tough, but I think it needs to be a win. Or there's a very good. I will tell you this is if these are if these are shaky at all in some of these scenarios, there could be that open date right from Notre Dame where they can make a decision on Pittman. They got a couple of different positions they can do that. Also, depending on that stretch between at Tennessee, home against A&M, home against Auburn, home against Mississippi State, with an open date, how does that land? But I think I got wins against A&M, Arkansas State, Memphis is my third. I think Mississippi State is my fourth, and I think Missouri is my fifth. I do have them in my mind a little bit higher than Missouri, a little bit less, a little bit more known and unknown with that. And so, could they slip one out against Notre Dame at home? I mean, Sam Pittman. It feels like Sam Pittman needs one of those wins this year, right? Like he needs a Notre Dame at home or Texas A&M at home. Uh, Definitely Missouri, I think, at home. If he's still the coach at Arkansas, then to really sufficefully say, hey, like we can make this work this year type season. But it's weird. It still doesn't feel like an Arkansas team that is riding that 6 to 7 to 8 win mark at any of the. That's a drastic change from 6 to 8 wins, um, but I have them at 5.5, and I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment of Arkansas. Um, Next team I have up coming in is Oklahoma. Once again, tough go at it with Oklahoma, trying to figure out with Oklahoma what 6.5 could look like. Let's pull their schedule really quick. Obviously, so many new faces. Offensive coordinator from Washington State coming in. Mateos, the quarterback from Washington State, coming in. So many things new going to be happening in the Oklahoma area for turnover, the transfer portal. But let's look at them. So Illinois State's going to be at home. Michigan's going to be at home. They go to Temple, home against Auburn. Then they have an open date. They get Kent State at home. They go to Texas. That'll be in Dallas though. And then at South Carolina, Ole Miss at home, at Tennessee, open date, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. So, if I'm looking at 6.5 wins, I'm thinking Illinois State is my one. I'm thinking Temple is my two. Kent State's my three. I think Missouri is my four. I think when you start looking at Auburn and you start looking at Auburn at home, I think that kind of puts it in perspective. I'm giving that fifth win there. And my sixth is coming from, is this a rebuild by Michigan still? Like, is Michigan still a rebuild? Can they grab their sixth at home there? So this could easily be an over-under nightmare again. I mean, I'm pushing the plate with, I think I got 4.5 for sure. I think I'm pushing to get to 6.5, but I got them at 6.5. I could have them a little high, in all honesty. Then I got coming in. I got Vanderbilt at 6.5. Let's pull Vandy's schedule really quick. I think over and under for Vanderbilt is fair to look at 6.5. Diego Pavia obviously coming in. A lot of starters returning on both sides. I don't know if we're going to speak too much to Vanderbilt, but let's just say, like, I don't know. We'll say like this. Is this Vandy's year? I don't know. Um, Charleston Southern at Virginia Tech at South Carolina. Georgia State at home. That's a scary game. It was scary for them last year. Utah State at home at Alabama. LSU at home. Missouri at home at Texas. Auburn at home. Then the open date. Kentucky at home. Then at Tennessee. Um, if I gotta have Vandy pull a few games from here, I think Charleston Southern's a win. I think Georgia State's a win. Hopefully, Utah State would be my third. I think Kentucky is my fourth. I think Missouri is my fifth, and I got Virginia Tech as my sixth. So my 6.5 could be an under. I'm pushing right to that brink, and I'm saying Vanderbilt. Does Vanderbilt grab one of these other games at Tennessee? It's gonna be a tough one to grab there. At South Carolina, could be up in the air, but just depends. Is this the South Carolina team that was hot ending, the end of year last year, or is this a South Carolina team that's coming in and is going to, have all the talent, but Beamer's going to fall short? I don't really know, but I got him at 6.5. I feel safe with 6.5. Next I got coming up is Florida. I think Florida is at 7.5 for me. This is a tough 7.5. I know when I was trying to get these 7.5 in here, it was definitely weird because is this Florida team coming off a year where they were really hot? They came in really hot, and a lot of great things going on with this Florida team. DJ Lagway is going to come back healthy. They went out in the portal, got some depth at the offensive line, defensive line, recruited well in their receiver room. Definitely have retained some senior leadership, junior senior leadership on defense in the secondary. So is this a Florida team that's poised to have a better year in the SEC? I think so. But, when I started pulling the schedule, man, I didn't know that Long Island was on their schedule. That's awesome. Long Island, they even have a football team. South Florida at LSU, at Miami, Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, open, Georgia and Jacksonville, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. So obviously, where am I getting my 7.5 from? I'm thinking they're going to get Long Island, right? Is Long Island going to show up? I don't know. But I'm thinking they get that. South Florida, I think, is a win. I think Miami is a win. Yeah, I think Miami's a win. I think I'm just going way too early, but Mississippi State's my fourth. Kentucky's my fifth. And I think your sixth and seventh has to be from a Florida State, or where do they grab another one from? Is it at Ole Miss? There's a possibility. Is it at Texas A&M? I think they're good enough to beat Texas A&M at Texas A&M, but it's not. I mean, it's College Station, So once again, pushing very, very close to that 6.5 win total. I'm giving 7.5 because I'm thinking, do they pull one of these out? I think they're capable of an 8-9 win season. If this roster pans out right, very capable of an 8-9 win season at Florida. Moving on ahead though, for time's sake. So the next team I have is South Carolina at 7.5. South Carolina is an interesting team this year. I think when you pull South Carolina's schedule and you look at what they're working with, obviously, returning the ever talented Lenore Sellers and a host of people, Central Arkansas at home, Kansas at home, Louisiana Lafayette. I'm sorry, I am in Missouri schedule. I was going to say South Carolina. I might have them a little bit. I might have them a little bit low, but I don't think I do. So yeah, here we go. Virginia Tech and Atlanta, South Carolina State, Vanderbilt at home, at Missouri, Kentucky at LSU, home against Oklahoma, Alabama, at Ole Miss, open date, then at Texas A&M, Coastal Carolina, and Clemson. I think where am I getting 7.5 from? Um, I think 7.5 is pretty spot on. I think you could go over or under with this if you're a betting man. I think Virginia Tech is a win. I think South Carolina State's a win. I think Vanderbilt's a win. I think Missouri's a win. I think Kentucky's a win. There's your 5 right there. I think there's a good possibility. Oklahoma is my toss-up game at 6, but I'm a. I think Coastal Carolina is my 7, and I don't think they get wins on the road at A&M at Ole Miss. So I'm giving my 7.5 swing game to either Oklahoma or at Texas A&M at Ole Miss. If I had to predict, I would say probably more on the lines of probably more on the lines of I would lean towards Oklahoma if I was looking at that to get them 7.5. Moving on, Ole Miss. This is a tricky one because Ole Miss. I mean, obviously, you look at Ole Miss. You know, you go, okay, well, you lose Jackson Dart, you lose a ton of. I mean, they went out and spent a ton of money in the portal. Um, so when you look at that, uh, you kind of go, okay, what does that leave in the tank for this year? Georgia State at home, at Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane, LSU, open date, Washington State at Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, the Citadel, Florida, open date at Mississippi State. So I got Ole Miss at 7.5. I got a slew of teams here at 7.5. Over and under. I think this is more of an over for me. I think 7.5. I think Georgia State is good. Kentucky is good for the second. Arkansas is the third. I think uh, they get 3 out of that. Tulane will be a hard game. Tulane will be a good game, but it'll be a hard game. I think Tulane is there though. Four wins for them there. Washington State is my 5th win. My 6th win is going to be the Citadel. My 7th win is going to be Mississippi State. This is an easy over 7.5, but I do think it's tricky. I do think you can't guarantee until we really get into seeing what these teams look like, even if we do see any preview during the spring. Your iffy games are still, obviously Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Florida. Those are all iffy games that you really can't call. They could swing. If you 50-50 them, they're a 10-win team in the playoffs. So I think it still has Ole Miss sitting in a good spot with those 7.5. My next team up is Missouri. I probably have them a little too high. If anything, I look back at Missouri now, but when the biggest thing Missouri wise is going to be the schedule. That's the thing with Missouri. It's the schedule. I think in the great big scheme of things, Missouri's 7.5 wins comes from a very, very easy schedule. I look at Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana Lafayette, South Carolina, all at home to start the year off. UMass, home, open date, Alabama. So they start out the year with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games. I know one of them is Alabama, but it's still a home game. They will have been sitting on a 5-game streak of home games before they even play Alabama. Then you got to go on the road to Auburn, at Vandy, open date. Texas A&M's at home. Mississippi State is at home. You got to go to Oklahoma and Arkansas. That's where I get my 7.5 wins. I mean, I get Central Arkansas, Kansas, Lafayette, and UMass as 4 of those wins. I think Mississippi State is my 5th. I think Arkansas is my 6th. I think my 7th is my toss-up games are Vandy, Texas A&M, South Carolina. So Missouri is also sitting there at borderline. Do they get their 7.5 or are they right there under it, more of a comfortable 6? But I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Here's the one where I might have reached a little bit. The next one I have on the list moving up is Auburn at 8.5. I might have reached a little bit for Auburn, but I feel like it is a year for Auburn to reach a little bit. So much hype around Hugh Freeze and the portal and so many things he did in the portal, and some of those freshmen growing up. He went out and got Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. Um, and you just have a lot of key components coming in for Auburn this year. And this is year 3 of Hugh Freeze. Is it hump year for Hugh Freeze? And so that's why I got him at 8.5. I got him at Baylor, Ball State at home, South Alabama at home, at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, Georgia at home, Missouri at home, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, at Vanderbilt, open date, home against Mercer, home against Alabama. So I'm getting my 8.5 wins, and man, I'm going out on a limb here because I'm gonna call these. I'm not gonna call them maybes. I do think this is a team that I feel like this is a year that they just have to get to this number, right? Baylor is a tricky game to begin the year, but at Baylor is a win. Ball State's a win. South Alabama's a win. 3. Arkansas's a 4. Kentucky's a 5. Vanderbilt's a 6. Mercer's a 7. And I think your swing game is your Oklahoma at Oklahoma as 8 or Texas A&M as your 8. And your half is, do you get one of those upsets? Is this the year that they, go, they're at home against Alabama? Is this a year, for them? I will tell you that they can hands-on strike up the hot seat for Kalen DeBoer. And so this is definitely a possibility at an 8.5 over and under year for Auburn. Moving on to LSU. Like LSU schedule this year. The biggest thing is this a flop year for the quarterback room at LSU? A lot of hype around Garrett Nussmeier returning. Schedule kind of lends itself for 9.5 wins. I got it at 9.5. At Clemson, Louisiana Tech, Florida, Southeastern Louisiana, at Ole Miss, South Carolina at home, at Vandy, home against A&M, at Alabama, Arkansas at home, Western Kentucky at home, and then they go to Oklahoma. So I'm grabbing 9.5 from this. I think, man, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be one of the best opening day games, if not the best opening day game of the season. One to watch with all the returning, especially with Cade Klubnik returning at Clemson, LSU returning Garrett Nussmeier. So I think at Clemson is a toss up, but let's give Louisiana Tech the win. Let's give Louisiana a win. That's 2. At Vanderbilt is 3 for me. Arkansas is 4. Western Kentucky 5. At Oklahoma is 6. Florida is 7 for me. Carolina is 8 for me, and Texas A&M is 9 for me. My half is Clemson, Alabama. I don't know about those 2. Those are my 2 that are kind of I'm up in the air on, that kind of get me to how do they get to 10. I do think if they get that 9.5, 9-10 wins in the SEC, I do think that gets them into the playoff though. So definitely something to look at. Next up, I have Tennessee scrounging 9.5 wins, over and under. Man, of course, I had an error code, right? All right, here we go. Wouldn't you know it? All right, so let's back out of here, and there we go. Had a little error going on right there. Thanks for bearing with me. So let's look at Tennessee real quick. Oh, we still have an error on Tennessee. 9.5 for Tennessee. Let's see if Alabama will pull up. There's some. I could possibly do Tennessee at the end. Let's see if Bama pulls up. Yeah, Bama's pulling up. So I got 9.5 for Bama. At Florida State, Louisiana Monroe, Wisconsin, Georgia at Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri at Missouri, Tennessee at home, at South Carolina, home against LSU, Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, and at Auburn. Tricky schedule, man. Tricky schedule for Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. At Florida State will be a tough one, but I think you got to win that game. You do not want that heat that early in the year on you. I'm going to go win there, win against Monroe. That's 2. I think they get Wisconsin at home, get a win. That's 3. Vanderbilt is 4. Missouri's 5. Tennessee will be tough. I think South Carolina will be 6. LSU will be 7, Oklahoma 8, Eastern Illinois 9, at Auburn 10. I think your toss-up games are going to be Georgia and then Tennessee at home. And yeah, that's what I got. That's what I got for Bama. Moving along to Texas, I got Texas at a strong 10.5. 10.5 is a strong 10.5 at Ohio State, San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston at Florida, Oklahoma and Dallas, Red River rivalry, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, at Georgia, Arkansas, and then Texas A&M. So I think they're getting wins. Even if I take out Ohio State, I think they're getting wins at San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston. I think they're winning at Florida. Oklahoma's a win. Kentucky's a win. Mississippi State's a win. Vanderbilt's your 8th. Arkansas is your 9th. Texas A&M is your 10th. So your 10.5 over and under is going to be either Ohio State or at Georgia. You like your chances with both of those. However, pick one or both. I will say that game against Ohio State is in Ohio State, and then obviously we're going to do Georgia. I think Georgia is at a strong 10.5 over and under. Marshall, Austin P, Tennessee at Tennessee, Alabama at home, Kentucky at home, at Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida, Mississippi State, Texas at home, Charlotte at home, and then Georgia Tech and Atlanta. I'm not going to game by game this one because it kind of gives away throughout the year, but I do think it lends itself for a very interesting. Sorry, I couldn't do Tennessee, but I do think it's a strong 9.5 for Nico and Tennessee. And some of these are going to be under, some of them are going to be over, but I feel really good about those. Fun fact: I know I was listening to Cousin Shane and the cousins over at that SEC podcast. I was hearing the quarterback ratings that they think could happen coming into this year, and it's not that I don't disagree with on paper the talent that's coming in, and when you look at Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi. But a fun fact for my Georgia fans out there was that I looked back at 2022, and what kind of grabbed me right offhand was the fact that in 2022, I don't know, in the offseason of 2022, if I were ranking quarterbacks coming into that year, I'm going to pull some names for you. And I don't know if you didn't know who Stetson Bennett was in this season, I don't know if you would have ranked Stetson Bennett above any of these guys coming into 2022. And that was, these names are interesting. Jaden Daniels, Bryce Young. These are all quarterbacks that I think on paper a lot of writers would have well above Stetson Bennett as far as statistically ranking them as a better quarterback in quarterback room coming into 2022. And that's Jaden Daniels, Bryce Young, Hendon Hooker, Will Rogers, Jackson Dart, Anthony Richardson, KJ Jefferson. I had Jackson Dart twice. Let me not. I don't want to belittle by any means. KJ Jefferson, Spencer Rattler, and Will Levis. I think Stetson Bennett would come in somewhere behind them. Maybe a strong 9th or 10th if they were probably given an off-season look at all that. That SEC podcast the other day had, I want to say I calculated that they had the Gunnar Stockton, Ryan Puglisi, Ryan Montgomery quarterback room in there around 10 or 11. And just so happens that would be where Stetson would have been ranked in the same year. And that's the year that Stetson finished with over 4,000 passing yards that year and went on to win a national championship. So little fun history fact with Georgia. And, you like to say you hope that that's where it lands, and Georgia precedes itself with that type of year this year, with Gunnar Stockton having some 4,000 plus Stetson Bennett SEC numbers. Would be nice. Very nice, but a pretty cool statistic that I thought was brought up. I want to end the night with some mailbag questions. A lot of mailbag questions coming in through other podcasts out there that are very popular that I wanted to speak into. Just answer 4 or 5 questions tonight that's been talked about. But one of the hottest questions around Georgia right now is the impact of certain players. And the two players that I've been hearing the most about is Nate Frazier and KJ Bolden. And a lot of the when you look at the needs now of these two players. A lot of people think that Georgia and the run game is a must this year, but we can't overlook the fact of how important KJ Bolden is going to be this year in that secondary. A young kid with tons of talent who has to replace a voice like Malachi Starks in that secondary, and not near off the same amount of starts that Malachi had. And so you look at the importance of Nate Frazier and KJ Bolden, and the question was asked was, who do we think needs to be more of an impact this year? That Nate Frazier, is that KJ Bolden? And a lot of people, you don't think this one through. You jump and you go immediately. You're like, oh, this is simple. It's got to be Nate Frazier. Why? Because Georgia's got to run the ball like Georgia has in the well, not in the previous 2 years, but Georgia's got to get back to running the ball like it's used to running the football if we're going to be back in the vying for the SEC championship and hopefully in the 12-team playoff, winning a national championship next year. I think we would all say we're going to have to reestablish running the football and dominating that line of scrimmage on that side of the ball. But it's interesting because I do feel like there is some solidarity with this KJ Bolden thing being a more tilt. I think KJ Bolden has to have some really solid numbers back there because you don't have a lot of incredibly returning vet talent in the secondary, and him being a key quarterback position. I think you can look at leaning on some of the other running backs, but I think KJ Bolden has to be a piece that comes together very quickly this year as a sophomore leader. I think he had a year to get up under his belt. I think he's an extremely incredible talent. But for me, I think the bigger stat for me in this line is going to actually be KJ Bolden. I think KJ Bolden has to have a really good year back there for Georgia to be successful. I think the tilt can be picked up a little bit on from the tight end room, the wide receiver room, and so forth and so on. Just good offensive line play. But I don't think we can sacrifice what is going to have to happen as far as leadership in that secondary this year to be successful in an SEC that is growing into a league that passes the ball way, way, way more now than the run dominance we used to have. Here's another mailbag question we have. Biggest flip stat, yards per carry next year for Georgia, or sacks, quarterback hurry? And I thought this was an interesting question. A lot of people lean towards, obviously, yards per carry. I do think that this is a stat that's true. I think we have to stat flip this immediately next year to be successful. I think yards per carry need to be something that has to be an impact stat flipper next year, because running the football is going to help Gunner be more balanced. And that was the keys to where Stetson Bennett, who at first, not being a high profile name and not having the best arm in the SEC or the best, I would call, frame physique, and a little bit underrated as a quarterback in the SEC. I think the establishment of putting him in great situations, great play calls, having great line play, and establishing the run, and a great defense obviously helped him be successful as he was in those 2 years where we won the national championship. I think we have to make that happen again. We have to go back to establishing the run and playing some bruiser football on that side of the football. And last question tonight, we talked about if we had a 9-game schedule. We're very close to having a 9-game schedule in the SEC. A lot of teams want this. I think you heard the AD from Texas come out and say they were like, we are pushing full tilt for a 9-game schedule. And a lot of people said, well, okay, so 9-game schedule, like who do you reassess? Like, who do you not play? Do you not play the Ohio States? Do you not play? Like, who do you not play? And he said, it was a bold statement, but he said, we play them all. He said, we're looked at as the top tier program or a top tier program. He said and so we should be playing the top talent out there, which I thought was bold, but he might be saying something different if they had 2 or 3 losses and maybe on the brink of getting into a college football playoff. He might be calling for an easier schedule, but if that, like, who would we like those 3 teams to be for Georgia? And I think the 2 that come to play, they're no-brainers for me, would be in the SEC, would probably more than likely be definitely Auburn. I think Auburn definitely is in that. I think It's definitely Florida because of the Jacksonville, that rivalry there. But I think we're really vying over one more game in there. I think if we had to look at proximity, you can look at a couple of options, but I think the one for me that makes the most sense that brings back a rivalry kind of feel, in my opinion, even though Tennessee has some rivalry vibes to it, obviously Alabama. But to me, those early games against South Carolina were games that I remember very fondly as a child and as a kid growing up watching, Georgia football. It normally was the SEC opener. And so I think that will be our third game to honestly say that would be a game to continuously see year round to kind of bring back that rivalry of Georgia, South Carolina. The proximity is still the same. And so I think that's a no brainer for that ninth game. All right, so as we wrap up tonight, obviously a lot of just content for you tonight. Usually have a lot more to bounce off with man Richman and Fish, but I went solo dolo tonight. But we are 8 days away from spring, so looking forward to Georgia obviously keeping the spring game. Excited about that. Excited to start seeing players in jerseys and to see some of these freshmen actually in pads and hear the stories and hear what reporters are saying about impacts of what's going on and what they're doing right now. And so that's very interesting. That is right around the corner after we felt like we're just merely weeks away from playing that national championship game. But it's right around the corner, and then we have that long, better weather than January, February, early March, but that long haul of days before summer workouts that we got to get through. And but we look forward to the next time we see grass, and that's March 12th. And so looking forward to that. Enjoyed. Thank you guys for joining tonight. If you haven't already done so, please go and support. Go to YouTube. Hop over to YouTube. Support Dogs Down South. Go follow. Hit that like button. Get us to 1,000 followers over there. As you know, we're on Instagram. We are on Facebook. You can go follow us on there. We're on TikTok, Dogs Down South. You can find us on TikTok tomorrow night. We'll be going live on TikTok doing the same SEC over and under on TikTok live. So go follow us over on there if you have not done so. A lot of content happening over there. And then obviously 24 hours later on Apple Podcasts. If you don't get a chance to grab this, you can go see it later. It'll be episode 51 with spring preview and over and under SEC win totals. So we're going to wrap it up for myself and my normal cohorts, Adam Fisher, Richman Cohen. Missed you guys, but we look forward to seeing you next time. Next time you hear from us will be in the heat of spring practice, and we'll be talking all things Georgia football and what we're seeing and some of these freshmen and what they look like, and hopefully showing lots of pictures and hearing lots of interviews from coaches on how things are going. But for myself and the rest of Dog Nation out there, you guys have a great night and go Dogs.